In recent years, we've seen a worrying rise in cases of subway surfing, a dangerous stunt where kids, teenagers, and young adults get on top of the roof of a moving train, running across its surface and jumping from wagon to wagon, unnecessarily putting their lives at risk and potentially others as well. While it's a phenomenon that's sadly become more common, in large part due to its proliferation on social media, subway surfing is not something new, and there's been documented cases of these sort of stunts going decades back. Much like today, subway surfing has always caused concern and outrage among people, resulting in many discussions, news articles, and other sorts of media that have warned against the dangers of these kinds of activities in order to protect young children and teens. On October of 1992, Fox aired a Batman the Animated Series episode titled The Underdwellers. It opens with two young kids riding on top of the roof of a Gotham City train going at full speed. The two kids are playing a game of chicken to see who gets afraid and jumps off the train first. Batman sees them, and as they are fast approaching an oncoming tunnel, he approaches to save them. This leads to one of the boys getting off the train, yet when the other boy tries to jump, he gets his foot caught in some cables. But Batman is able to save him right before the train is about to pass through the tunnel, and he warns both kids to be more careful, making them realize that if they had continued playing, they would have died.
You play chicken long enough, you fry.
Now, a scene like this with such a straightforward message directed towards kids, warning them against something or making them more conscious about an important issue, is something that used to be way more common in children's media. This was especially prevalent during the 80s and 90s, where a lot of cartoons used to have segments in their shows that served as public service announcements, or PSAs, where the heroes of the show directly addressed the young kids in the audience and delivered important lessons like safety tips or health advice, usually done in order to meet specific educational requirements that shows had to achieve. These PSAs were almost always very preachy and used to deliver their message in a bit of a condescending way, making their messages as obvious as possible for even the youngest of kids who might have been watching the program. But throughout the 90s, we started seeing animated shows that attempted to handle mature topics in a more nuanced way, without having to talk down to their audience or overly simplify these complex issues. Batman the Animated Series had writers that truly respected their audience and trusted them to understand the subject matter they were trying to tackle without having to spoon-feed their messaging, all without feeling preachy. This very episode that we're discussing today, The Underdwellers, was about Batman stopping the Sewer King, a criminal that was keeping lost children as hostages in the sewers and forcing them to rob for him, dealing with such themes as child neglect, abuse, homelessness, poverty, and, as we saw in the beginning, it even tackled subway surfing. Now, I have to clarify that I'm not making this video to say that Batman the Animated Series predicted subway surfing, because sadly, this really isn't a new thing. There were already cases of people dying due to riding on top of trains at the time that this episode was produced, and even decades before the 90s. For example, according to archived newspapers from the time, the earliest documented instance where people died subway surfing was all the way back in 1904, with two teenagers, 13 and 14, who died while riding on top of a rail car bound for Grand Central Terminal in New York City. It's something that's been happening for literally over 100 years, and it more often than not affects young people, attracting the most impressionable sector of society, and the kinds of people who are more likely to be affected by peer pressure. Children and teenagers are very receptive and susceptible. They're at a point in their lives where they're shaping the person who they'll be in the future. And a lot of their opinions, beliefs, and the information they retain tends to come from not only their environment and education, but also the media they consume. Kids are like sponges, absorbing every new detail that gets presented to them, and it can lead to some kids being attracted to very dangerous ideas without fully understanding their consequences. This is related to the growing cases of subway surfing, because many of the kids that subway surf do it in part because they're influenced by the viral videos they see on social media of other kids subway surfing. It's normal to yearn for some kind of validation or to be seen, but technology has led to a culture of instant gratification that impedes young people from thinking about the long-term consequences of their actions and what they choose to post online. Even if kids understand that they could die from subway surfing, a lot of them don't consider all the other horrible outcomes that could happen, like surviving but being disfigured for the rest of your life. And I'm willing to bet that most kids don't truly understand why they have a desire to do such a thing, since we live in a time where a lot of our desires and ideas actually come from the media we choose to watch. Considering all this, I believe it's actually pretty useful to address important messages and topics in media intended for younger audiences. And I think it's a lot better that a kid's first impression of subway surfing be in an episode of a cartoon where Batman shows you the consequences of something so dangerous, rather than their first impression being from a short 1-minute TikTok that's only designed to capture your attention, on an app that wants you to release as much dopamine as possible, and don't think critically about what you're watching. Something that honestly makes me kinda sad is how most kids nowadays don't even really grow up watching cartoons like older generations did. Instead, they are spending their childhoods consuming short-form content created by influencers, content that in the vast majority of cases doesn't provide anything of substance to its viewers, and in the worst cases they can encourage very negative habits and ideas, like consumerism, hateful rhetoric, or highly imitable dangerous acts that will most likely kill you if you attempt them. Of course, influence from social media is only one factor behind the motivation of those people that choose to subway surf. It's a fairly complex issue. But I think it's still relevant to acknowledge the impact that media can have on young people, especially since it's such a susceptible and impressionable time in our lives, and the messages we internalize during that time can have a profound, lifelong impact on us.